All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Benton. I'm a board member here at ALD Connect. I have been affected, not personally, but my family has been affected by ALD for a very long time, since actually the 1950s. My uncle passed away from childhood cerebral. My mother, a beautiful lady over there, Patty Chapman, is here. She is a woman with ALD, fearless warrior. And unfortunately, I lost my brother in 2020 to AMN as well. So without further ado, I just want to say, first off, how honored I am to be able to moderate this panel. I think I'm not biased when I say it's the best part of this conference. As much as, hey, yeah, round of applause. Round of applause. And I do want to take a minute to acknowledge all of our first-time attendees to ALD Connect. So if you want to raise your hand, any first-time attendees? Wow, huge round of applause. And I want to make it a point for everyone to just make those people feel welcome here. And I want to say thank you to those people who did come. This is what ALD Connect is all about. So thank you guys for coming. Okay, so we have 4 incredible speakers today. I want to thank you guys for being so brave to come up and tell your stories. I know it's not always easy. We've got tissue boxes for you, right? Okay, good. So first off, we have Alexis Larea. Did I do that okay? Okay, good. Hopefully your husband heard that. Laria. Alexis is a proud mother of 2, raising 2 boys under the age of 3. Her journey with ALD began when her youngest son was diagnosed through Florida's newborn screening program. While her eldest son remains blissfully ALD free, her youngest son's diagnosis triggered a familial domino effect, uncovering several more ALD positive relatives. So let's all please welcome Alexis Larea.
Good morning, everyone. So like Greg said, my name is Alexis. I'm grateful to be here for my first ALD Connect conference in person. I'm a mother and a new ALD advocate, I call myself. And so I want to share a little bit of our story and our journey of our family's life that forever changed in a single phone call. It was a diagnosis and a journey that no parent is ever prepared to take. I want to go through that journey with you through the lenses of the 5 stages of grief, because I think everyone can kind of relate to that as a newborn screen parent. And I also want to foreshadow it for everyone who's joining online or is a newly diagnosed parent in the room today, that you are not hurting anyone's feelings by logging off or leaving the room. It's a very heavy topic. It's not glamorous or happy by any means. And don't worry, Mom, I've got my waterproof mascara on as much as I can. So you go through that first stage of denial. So it started with a phone call I did not want to answer. I was on maternity leave, like most of us are, juggling life with a newborn. His name is Nicholas Lando, and so we just call him Lando, somehow stuck. I am a 2 under 2 mom. They're 13 months apart, and if anyone in here is a Formula One fan, Lando did not come from Star Wars. And I like to joke around because if you watch Formula One, the 22 McLaren F1 team was Daniel and Lando. And so I have my own 22 McLaren F1 team at home. But like any postpartum mom, you're doing your best of, dreaming of some rest on maternity leave. And so my family decided while I was 4 weeks postpartum to take a trip from Florida up to West Virginia. We wanted to have a little bit of a getaway at Snowshoe Mountain, and I sat down. We were walking into a restaurant for lunch, and I happened at the time to be working for the University of Miami. So anyone who knows Pitbull knows that a 305 area code is from Miami. And so I get a phone call from a 305 number. and that is my employer's phone number that started. I looked at it and was like, I am definitely not answering this phone call. I am on maternity leave, and I will not be answering that. I knew something was wrong, though, when my husband immediately, seconds later, gets a phone call from the same number. And I said, you can answer that, and please tell my boss to buzz off. I'm on maternity leave, and they can talk to me in 8 weeks. But whatever the emergency was, at least acknowledge, the emergency. That was the phone call that shifted my life. It was the University of Miami's health system, where I worked, calling to let us know that our newborn son had adrenoleukodystrophy, a condition I had never heard of. I was in absolute disbelief. I knew this couldn't be happening. I had undergone genetic testing prior to pregnancy. I had done a panel through Quest where they advertise that they test for over 400 different conditions. You would think that ALD would be one of them. I had done genetic testing through 23andMe and also through a company known as Myriad. There were no red flags prior to us trying to have a family. I figured it had to be some kind of a mistake. We're sitting at this restaurant looking at our newest bundle of joy, and my husband is debriefing this phone call, and it felt like it had to have been the most hectic phone call of his life. And I'll never forget my dad. He was with us, looking at our little Lando, saying, there's absolutely nothing wrong with him. Look at him, he's totally fine. My dad is forever the optimist, and my mom is the family's realist, so naturally, I'm the most realistic, optimistic person there is. Google was not your friend as a newborn screen parent. Our son did fail his newborn screen hearing, and on some random obscure ALD site, it said that you should look for hearing loss. And while we waited for our first genetics appointment, which was only 24 hours later, it felt like the longest day of my life. I told my family after we got home from lunch, I'm going to go ahead and take a shower. I was in there for hours, just masking the crying. Despite what you see here today, I was never one to show emotion until this diagnosis knocked on our doorstep. So you're in denial. There's no way it could be happening to me. And then you get the domino effect of your family testing. I am ALD positive. My 29-year-old brother, my mother, her sister, and my 89-year-old grandfather. They all luckily live asymptomatic and healthy lives, but you've gone through this first stage of grief. You try so hard to rationalize it away. Maybe it's a false positive. They had to have mixed up the results. There's no way this is my child. Our pediatrician never got our results, so I had to call him and inform him of the results. Even our pediatrician thought it had to be an error, and I clung to that. I believed it, and I wanted to. And to this day, my poor mom cannot walk into the restaurant we got our first phone call at. To no fault of their own, of course. But I'm triggered by it every year when I walk by it on our Christmas trip. You kind of then move out of denial and you go into anger. It takes its place. I was mad at everything. Why us? Why my son? Why did this happen when I had done everything right pre-pregnancy? Why do prenatal genetic tests that providers send us to not include the ABCD1 gene? I really hated Quest Diagnostics with a passion for a very long time. And if it's so important that we're testing for it on newborn screening, why are we not testing for it on this 400, gene panel that's so important? I read article about ALD and about boys who develop symptoms and quickly decline. So the more I read, the angrier I got. I felt cheated. Angry that no one ever prepared me for this possibility. I'm a planner by nature. My planner has its own Instagram account. It's like my little scrapbooking hobby. And as a planner, this is probably one of the hardest conditions to get. You you're being told with this newborn they'll be lucky if they see the age of 8. Their bedside manner might not always be the greatest. And as a planner, you want to give your child a different life if you think they're going to live until 8 versus living until 80. Nobody told me at the time that there's a life where they could live, where there's a positive outcome or a fulfilled life. No matter what rendition of this condition that you have, there's hope. Everything felt like doomsday from what I had heard from those initial providers. And that was until I met our amazing experts, many of you in this room today. I was supposed to be enjoying those first few months of my son's life, bonding with him, cherishing those fleeting newborn moments. And instead, I was consumed with anger and fear. I completely detached from my child at 4 weeks old. And I didn't bond with him until after our initial baseline MRI in Boston and that first meeting with Dr. Eichler. I finally felt like I made it through that first hurdle. I didn't bond with him, and that first year of angst and worry I'll never get back. And I will forever apologize to my son that I treated him like that his first year. I apologize to all my friends who had special events and family who had so many celebratory moments that I was never fully present for. As time passes, you enter the bargaining stage. You want to fix it. You want to find a way for everything to go back to normal. I scheduled countless appointments with specialists looking for someone to tell me there was a mistake. I searched for therapists. This is the first time in my life I recognized I needed help. But finding someone who understood this rare condition was a challenge in and of itself. I had to retell our story over and over and over again. And it feels like reliving the initial trauma. I went through 7 different consults with a therapist before finally someone would work with me. You would hear every excuse under the sun. I don't have any experience in this condition. I'm not capable of relating. I'm not the right fit for you. I heard every excuse, and on my last ditch effort, I finally found someone who was willing to learn and work with me. And then you finally start to feel comfortable sharing with your friends. And I'll never forget telling my best friend Laura, who's here today, about what was going on with our son. And her response was wholly expletive. They made me watch that movie in my genetics class, Lorenzo's Oil. I don't recommend you watch that right now at this phase of diagnosis. On top of managing my son's routine pediatric care, geneticists, endocrinologists, neurologists, and my own postpartum care, and what would soon be my mental health care, something unimaginable happened. My pediatrician, the man who had been my doctor for 2/3 of my life, and the quarterback of our ALD care, died by suicide. His loss was such a low blow that I still haven't recovered from. He was my rock, managing both my boys' care and keeping me grounded along with my family. Just days before he passed, I sat with my family at our usual Saturday restaurant. We eat there every Saturday. And our doctor was there too with his wife. And so that I could eat a peaceful meal, he took my son and held him for the entire meal. Little did I know that days later he would take his own life. But grief is a strange thing. You think you've reached acceptance, and then there's something that drags you back into an earlier stage. You'll circle back and forth through anger and depression. There were days where I didn't think I could see forward. Every call with your insurance company, every doctor's visit, every memory of that first phone call with the geneticist reopened that wound. You circle through guilt. My family is lucky that we have so many asymptomatic family members, and that others that have this diagnosis aren't as lucky as we are. You circle back to the feeling of guilt that you gave this to your child. I know I'm still at the point in my journey where no matter how many times you all tell me that it's not my fault, you know I didn't get it from anyone else. It's a tremendous guilt and a burden to carry that I still work on. But in time, I know and I will find a path forward. And that's when I discovered ALD Connect. This community of parents and patients understands me and my family. They've become my lifeline. They help me navigate the overwhelming world of ALD. And through the support groups and the calls, I finally began to see hope and resilience. I started to understand why ALD is included in newborn screening, because there is hope when it's caught early. Something that it took me a while to process and really understand. I met families whose children have received treatment in time, and I realized that while ALD is considered a life-threatening condition, newborn screening gives us a fighting chance and a more successful chance at a fruitful and fulfilling life. Acceptance doesn't mean the grief goes away. It doesn't. But acceptance has allowed me to move forward with the new understanding that while ALD is a heavy burden to carry, I'm not carrying it alone. My husband's also thrilled that I have a new support group. He's probably seen me cry more the past 2 years than the 12 combined that we've been together. And to conclude, I just want to remind everyone, grief is not linear. It'll circle back. It takes unexpected turns. It can feel overwhelming, suffocating, and lonely. But within that grief, there's hope. Hope in the community we build, hope in the advancements of medical care, hope in the early diagnosis that gives us time to act. I've even found a new passion project in becoming an ALD advocate and advocating to our state politicians for more rights for individuals diagnosed with ALD, regardless of phenotype. Sometimes that political science and law decree comes in handy. And for those of you who are beginning your journey now, just know that you're not alone. You do need to advocate for yourself before you can successfully advocate for your children. There is hope regardless of your variant or your phenotype. And for those of you who've been fighting this battle for longer, thank you for lighting the way for families like mine. I appreciate you all and I'm forever grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Really, really such a powerful and moving story. Thank you for being so vulnerable with us. I know that is not an easy thing. So thank you again. We're going to take questions from the audience at the end for each panelist. So feel free to save your questions for the end. I just want to ask Alexis. There are some new ALD parents in the room. What advice would you have for them?
Give yourself grace initially. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your son. I think the one thing that I've always gone through too is that knowledge is power. You have such an amazing and phenomenal community here. Take advantage of it. I mean, how many other conferences are you ever going to be able to get to go to where you see your providers in the room and actually get to have a conversation like that? Very few and far between. Rely on the people that are around you. Let us support you and lift you up. And it's going to be okay.
Thank you, Alexis. All right, our next incredibly brave speaker is Janelle Zavodnik. Janelle is an ALD mom and advocate of Cody 23 and PJ Forever 11. She was instrumental in advocating for Arizona ALD newborn screening. So let's give a warm welcome to Janelle.
Hi. My boys, PJ and Cody, they were born back in 2001 and 2003. They were best friends and worst enemies, just like most brothers are. PJ loved to draw and play video games and wrestle with his big brother. But he especially loved to make others laugh. That was his gift. Our story unknowingly began not even 2 months after my husband, Kip, passed away from complications of cancer treatment. On April 15, 2011, PJ came home from school with a failed vision screening. On April 15, 2011, I took him to an optometrist, who then referred us to an ophthalmologist. PJ was diagnosed with a lazy eye and given a prescription for glasses. I was told that his eyes were no longer working together and that we needed to patch his good eye so that we could get the most out of his bad eye. The patching did not help, and PJ was told to continue to wear glasses to protect his good eye from injury so that he could eventually get his driver's license at 16. Then at the beginning of third grade, PJ mentioned to me that he was having a hard time concentrating in school. His teacher had not noticed anything, and so I spoke to the school counselor, and she suggested that I have him tested for ADD. His pediatrician determined he did not have ADD and said that we would continue to watch him into the fourth grade. Meanwhile, PJ began to stumble and fall easily. He also became very forgetful. He forgot how to take out the garbage, how to get home from the bus stop that was at the end of our street. I asked the school to test him for learning disabilities, and they told me it was a long, drawn-out process that would take about 6 months. He started being bullied. I talked to the teacher and the school counselor. It didn't stop. So I removed him from public school and put him in a charter school. They were wonderful, but PJ was regressing quickly. We were at the pediatrician's office in November of 2013 for Cody when PJ became both physically and verbally aggressive towards me. I said to the doctor, "This is not my son. What do I do?" I was given the choice to call the behavioral health crisis hotline or take him to the ER. I chose to take him to the ER. After about 6 hours of waiting, the doctor talked to us and examined PJ. I told the doctor what was happening to PJ, had PJ walk for him, and begged him to get a CT scan. He agreed and came back later, handed me a piece of paper with the words demyelination and leukodystrophy. I had no idea what either word meant. PJ was admitted to the hospital so that an MRI and a spinal tap could be done the next day. On the evening of November 15, 2013, the neurologist met with me, and she told me that my 10-year-old son indeed had leukodystrophy, believed to be adrenal leukodystrophy. She told me the disease was too advanced for treatment, and that in 6 months to 2 years, PJ would be in a vegetative state and die. The following day, I took him home, and our lives were forever changed. 6 weeks later, the diagnosis of X-linked adrenal leukodystrophy was confirmed. This meant Cody would need to be tested as well. Cody had been having symptoms of dehydration, including headaches, muscle cramps, and flank pain. So I had been giving him water with extra electrolytes. Cody was darker complected than anyone else in our family for several years. No one, including any of his doctors, had ever mentioned the possibility of Addison's disease. On January 7, 2014, it was confirmed that Cody too had ALD. Cody was experiencing adrenal insufficiency and was dangerously close to crisis. His cortisol was extremely low and ACTH was extremely high. I had PJ tested for AI, and his ACTH was even higher than Cody's. They were both immediately put on steroids. PJ and Cody's diagnosis led to other family members being tested. Myself, my older sister, and her 26-year-old daughter all tested positive for the same mutation as my boys. I thank God my niece was diagnosed before she had children. The diagnosis gave her the knowledge to make responsible decisions. The next step for Cody was an MRI. The results showed 2 small lesions. So we flew to Minnesota to began to prepare for a bone marrow transplant. After discussing the urgency, as well as the short time we had left with PJ, we decided to go on PJ and Cody's Make-A-Wish trips. Then we would reevaluate Cody after we got back. 3 months later, Cody's MRI was stable. Since we could not think of being away from PJ for what would likely be his last remaining months, we agreed to continue to monitor Cody closely. He had MRIs every 3 months, and we agreed to move forward with transplant if there were any signs of progression. Meanwhile, PJ began to have absence seizures and tire very easily. His speech, behavior, memory, and coordination became more and more affected. He had several scary falls, one being when he fell backwards on the escalator at the airport. His legs were fitted for AFOs, and then soon he needed a wheelchair. I made accommodations in our home and purchased a wheelchair van. In June 2014, PJ had a long grand mal seizure, which left him blind. By his 11th birthday, he was completely dependent. We spent Thanksgiving in the hospital, waiting for a G-tube to be placed because he could no longer swallow. On December 13, 2014, my precious boy said his very last word and lost his ability to speak. PJ smiled for the very last time on Christmas Eve 2014. No longer hearing his voice or seeing his smile was extremely painful because he had a smile that would melt your heart and a contagious laugh that brought joy to everyone that ever heard. On February 5, 2015, he could no longer tolerate feedings, and the next day hospice told me he had 24 to 48 hours to live. At 7:54 a.m., February 9, 2015, PJ exhaled his very last breath while in my arms. PJ lived 14 months, 25 days after diagnosis. He died from a disease that he had since birth, but we didn't know until it was too late. He was the bravest boy with a heart of gold. I promised him I would fight to have ALD added to Arizona newborn screening. ALD was added to Arizona newborn screening in 2020, and they began testing in 2021. I'm happy to say my niece gave birth to a beautiful baby boy 2 years ago. It is ALD free. It's 10 years later, and Cody's 23 now. He has annual brain MRIs that it remains stable, but he has severe pain, spasticity, gait issues, and frequent falls. All of this has taken a huge toll on Cody's mental health. I'm so grateful that ALD Connect has brought attention to that part of the disease as well as the physical. It affects us all. Thank you for all you do, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janelle. So moving. And what an incredible legacy you've left for your son by getting ALD added to Arizona. Just amazing. That's fascinating. It's just so great. What was one of the biggest challenges you faced getting ALD added to the newborn screening panel in Arizona?
Back in 2015, I started making phone calls, and I spoke with legislators, and every one of them told me that I couldn't do it without getting Arizona March of Dimes on board. It took 4 years, but they actually came to me and said, we need your help. And so together, we got help of other ALD families, Janine, and some others, and we got it done. The other thing was COVID. It delayed things a little bit because they shut everything down. But as soon as they got back up, we went after them.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you so much. Okay, our next speaker is Brandon Turner, a 38-year-old man with AMN. He is the first in his family to be diagnosed, which was back in August of 2021, after a year-long diagnostic journey. Brandon is a director of wealth management in Dallas, Texas. He is a certified financial planner, private wealth advisor who graduated from Texas Tech University. Did I get all that right? Okay, good. All right, let's give a warm welcome to Brandon.
Okay. Yeah, like we said in the intro there, I was diagnosed in 2021, so haven't had a long known history with this disease. No known family history. My maternal grandfather was very likely misdiagnosed with MS, passed away in his mid to late 70s from non-ALD factors. But with that lack of knowledge and family history, I had a pretty normal childhood, and was really lucky in that. Kind of just blissfully ignorant of the disease. And so, looking back, symptoms probably started in my early to mid 20s. I was reasonably athletic, and so early to mid 20s was kind of where I could still sprint, but it just felt weird, which now of course makes perfect sense. My late 20s, jogging is kind of stiff and springy, and I can do it, but not well. And that's, that steady, slow progression has kept up, and now it's starting to affect normal walking and, kind of catching a toe and getting asked if, oh, did you hurt yourself, from work colleagues and things, which, launches into the, get used to it. This is just how I walk now conversation. So yeah, lots of kind of little signs like that. And then during COVID, August of 2020, on a hike with my siblings, and we in the hills of Arkansas, beautiful country, and did a water crossing. I'll say streams not as wide as this room is, but decided that we should probably take our shoes off. We'll do this barefoot, not hike in wet shoes, and some combination of water and cold and bare feet on rocks just didn't. I couldn't do it. Couldn't fully stand and walk and put my weight on bare feet through that. So that was kind of the first real wake up call that, hey, there's, it's not just getting older and getting out of shape. There's really something here. And as luck would have it, my little brother is at the time, still is a neurosurgery resident, so has a little bit of knowledge in the area, and suggested like, hey, yeah, that's not normal. Your gait is a little weird. Like, you should probably go see somebody about this. So that launched what many in the room have experienced as far as a long diagnosis process that took about a year, several doctors, a few different neurologists in there, of this suspected disease, that suspected disease, countless blood draws, EKG, EMG, a lumbar puncture, and the CFS leak to go with it. Finally got an MRI that revealed the trademark spinal cord atrophy. So that was the first, kind of, aha, there's something. And then fortunately found my way to UT Southwestern in Dallas, where on the first visit there, the doctor said, hey, I don't think it's those other things you've been told. I think it's AMN. And then ironically got the call confirming that diagnosis on a road trip driving into the north end of Boston that has now become an annual trip. So a little bit of just small world there. Symptoms today, really, for me, I'm on the less affected end. So certainly abnormal gait, muscle tightness, and then I get those kind of the I don't know what the medical term for this, but the kind of mild electric shock. Mostly a normal life, fortunately. I would say the approach to the disease is kind of, worry about what you can control. So keeping up with those doctor visits, having that annual MRI, staying on top of, stretching and staying active, doing what I can to slow progression of the disease. Certainly being plugged into this ALD community, as both of these women have said, has been a huge advantage to the disease. Just having a group, the AMN men's group, and I know I've got several compatriots here. Shout out to Ken for keeping that going. Has been huge. Just to have a community that is experiencing these same things, sharing kind of the tips and tricks of dealing with the disease and different strategies to just make life a little easier and a little better. I think beyond those things you can control and that I can control, the course of the disease is going to be what it's going to be. And so my real focus is to not put anything in my way that the disease isn't already going to put there. Like I said, today I can walk unassisted. I'm sure I'll join those of you with walking aids at some point. Maybe me and Ken can race our rollators around. And at some point I'll probably join those of you in, wheelchairs and electric chairs. But until then, I'm going to continue to, live life and have adventures and all that kind of thing. So I think it's important to not let the disease kind of define you and be your only focus in life.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Appreciate that share. As a relatively new member of the AMN community and recently been connected with ALD Connect, what's something you'd like to see more of, or if you could change something for men with AMN like yourself, or within the ALD Connect community, what would you like to see? And I didn't prep him on this question, so give him some leniency here.
I think one of the a change that would be kind of attainable is trying to make more doctors aware of it. Because that year is just full of, like I said, it's just countless visits and tests and everything. And yeah, a lot of the tests aren't super intrusive or anything, but it's just the time, the mental angst of going through there. And we've had several people when it's their first meeting with this AMN men group, several people have just said, I'm just glad I have a name for this thing. And so if we could improve that and shorten that time, that would be huge.
Thanks again, Brandon. Okay. Our last speaker is Chris Kelly, a symptomatic woman with ALD. Received her diagnosis in 2022 following several years of MRIs, blood tests, countless doctor visits. During the day, she's a marketing manager for a civil engineering firm. And after hours, she can be found relaxing with her chickens and her Australian Shepherd, and also your husband. Okay, him too. Who is also her biggest supporter. And she looks forward to seeing more research on women with ALD. So let's all please welcome Chris Kelly.
Thank you. So yeah, my a lot of similarities with Brandon's story. I have some slides. I grew up in northwestern Montana. And no, we do not take people to the train station, and it's a lot colder than they depict on TV. I had a very active childhood. I was either my nose in a book, or I was out of the house hiking, running, walking. I was a state track champ in the 800 meters. It's a brutal thing. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But I had a really normal life, and as I got older, I'm currently 51, but it was about probably 10 or 12 years ago, just started noticing just weird things, like my hip flexors got really tight. So I started getting kind of a hunched over walk. And so it was during COVID. And I was like, well, I got some free time here. I'm working from home. I'm going to go see someone and see if they can deal with this. And I went to an osteomanipulative therapist. And after 3 visits, she said, I'm not going to see you anymore because I'm not helping you. Sent me to a chiropractor, a physical therapist. I got worse, and she didn't know what to do with me. My right IT band freaked out. I started using a cane. And so I went to a different physical therapist, and while I was with her, IT band pain went away, but I lost the use of my left leg. Felt like I was tearing the quad off my kneecap in 3 places. So I crawled for 2 days, used a walker for about 6 weeks, and with the physical therapist finally got back to the point where I could walk. But from that point forward, generally walked with a cane. But during one of the visits, she was on PTO, and so I got her boss. And if anyone's been to a physical therapist, they're great because they are always watching you. You get out of the car, and they're watching you. Because you get out of the car, you're not masking. And she took one look at me, and she said, I want to run some tests on you. And I said, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm like, I got a no-fly zone, but other than that, I'm here for you. You can touch whatever part of my body you want. Help me. And she got done with it, and everything she did, my body fought. And I couldn't understand it. And I just wanted to say, my body doesn't trust you. And nothing, it just didn't make sense. And we got done, and she said, you need to go get an MRI right now. And I said, well, okay, but why? And she said, I think you have MS or ALS. Which, at that point, I'd already been doing, Google, not your friend. Yeah, I'd already decided I had MS, but I wasn't telling anybody that. And I was doing my own little secret research and hiding it from my husband. And so I was like, okay, well then, this is going to confirm I have MS. My husband, on the other hand, thought I had ALS. And he was distraught for a week. Got in to see my neurologist, who I had been seeing for a couple years. I have an essential tremor in both my hands. So I'd had brain and cervical MRI. Those were fine. Didn't realize at the time that I already had clonus and the positive Babinski response, which I hadn't noticed that during the evaluation that my neurologist had done. It wasn't until the physical therapist did the clonus test while I was laying on my back, and I watched my foot chatter, and that is a terrifying moment when you see that and go, what the hell is wrong with me? And so went to the neurologist. She said, yep, we'll do the full suite for lumbar or brain, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. And I said, so after that, we'll do a spinal tap, right? And she said, why would I give you a spinal tap? I said, well, I have MS. She said, no, you don't. I said, how about ALS? And she looked at me and said, no, you don't have that. And so I said, but I have, clonus and a positive Babinski response. And that's what, and she's like, who said this to you? And I told her, and I've never seen someone roll their eyes without rolling their eyes. And she's like, you've had that for years, honey. That's not your problem. So she said, but we'll do the whole suite. Did the testing. Everything was fine. Everything continues to be fine. But she had no diagnosis for me. Their response was, oh, that's just how God made you, which is not helpful. So luckily I ended up with a new doctor who saw my condition and said, so what are they doing? I said, nothing. She said, no. And so she called and she rang my neurologist bell and said, this is your job. You have to figure this out. This is not in my wheelhouse. If you can't figure it out, I'm sending her to the Mayo Clinic. So we started tons of blood work, which is really fun. At no point were they telling me what they were testing for. So when I got my MyChart results, I got to tell my husband, oh, hey, guess what? I don't have syphilis. Every test I had, I was telling him, it's not this, it's not that. That one, he was a little concerned. He's like, him rushing in the house. He's like, I didn't know that was on the table. Do we need to have a conversation? I was like, no. I'm just letting you know along the way. And so finally, after several years, my neurologist said, we're going to get you genetic testing. I think you have hereditary spastic paraplegia. And so I said, okay, cool. And I went back to my physical therapist. I said, we think this is what it is. It's going to take me a year to get my genetic testing done in Montana. So let's just, it's pain relievers or muscle relaxants and physical therapy. So let's just get started. And so I did about 6 months with her on that. Had my genetic testing. They came back and said, nope, not HSP. You have ALD. And until I could get the actual, and it took the genetic testing, and then it was uncertain, so I had to do several blood tests. The first one was inconclusive. Second one through Candy Krieger. I couldn't get anyone in Missoula, Montana to take my blood, or in the small town of Stevensville where I live. No one would do it and send it off to another party outside of their network. So I spent a day calling, hey, here's my situation. I need blood test. Here's where we need to send it. Sorry, we can't help you. I said, who can? Try these guys. I'd hang up the phone. I'd cry, give it an hour. I'd work some more, make another phone call. It took several days until I finally found someone who would take the test for me. Got my diagnosis. It took a month before I would see my genetics team. So during that time, I told my inner circle. And when my friends immediately wrote back, and her aunt is in the medical field, and she said, here's what my aunt says. ALD Connect is where you need to reach out. They will give you the information you need. There's research. It was a life-changing moment for me. Having that resource, it was great. Because until then, it was, I know nobody with ALD. I got ready for my genetics consult after my diagnosis. I did genetics in high school. I can do this. I charted my mom's family tree, my dad's family tree, showed it to my geneticist, like, there's no one else in my family. I can't see where this came from. So they're like, yeah, you're de novo. You're the first one. Funny story, I was telling Tiffany this morning, just to make sure, because I grew up in a small rural town, things happen when people are growing up. I did 23andMe a few months ago just to make sure my family's my family. Maybe that explains why I'm the only one. they're stuck with me, or we are still related. But yeah, so here's a photo of my new normal. I spend a lot of time with my chickens. My husband is my mixologist. He makes my cocktails. I hang out. I relax. Lower right is one of the few photos of me with my cane. Very, very self-conscious. I did all of this during COVID, and I just thought, before I figured out my diagnosis, I'll just get better and come back to work. No one's going to know. So I didn't tell anybody, which means no one knew what my husband and I were going through. I didn't even tell our daughters. I didn't, stepdaughters. I didn't, I wanted to get through it and just continue being strong. And then thought, what will help me maybe, before I knew what was going on, maybe I need to lose some weight. So I did Noom. So I came back from COVID. I'd lost 55 pounds and I had a cane, and my staff was terrified, and no one would talk to me about it because they didn't know what to say and they didn't know how to have that conversation with me. And so in photos, I would often hide my cane because I was very self-conscious of it. The photo in the top right with my staff is probably the only photo that exists of Roxy, my rollator. I, again, tend to hide her a lot. I don't show her. I should. And then next slide. My takeaway from this, I did therapy. My company offers therapy. I did therapy with this because my symptoms became, when it was the acute symptoms, was about a year after my mom died. And I had several medical professionals say, well, maybe this is in your head. And I said, God, I hope so. Let it be in my head. Give me the right therapist, a stack of notebooks in a year, and I will rock this. I will fix it. And obviously, as we all know, that's not how it works. But one of the things I talked to my therapist about was how I wasn't telling people and I was hiding it. And she said, why do you think that is? And I'm like, I just want to be strong and I'm independent and I do everything myself. And, I have this vision of myself. And one of the things that I really struggled with and have been coming to terms with is asking for help. Asking for help and accepting people's help. I had a gentleman, I run a chili cook-off every year before our in-state football rivalry. And before, back when it was just my hip flexors that were bothering me, I was bringing in all my supplies to cook my chili. And one of my guys, we're, of course, 2 floors up, and I never took the elevator. And one of my guys met me at the landing and said, here, let me help you. And I said, no, I've got it. And bless his heart, he looked at me and he said, don't tell me I came all the way down here for nothing. And I said, you came down to help me? He said, of course I did. Okay. Gave him my bags. The next day, I brought more stuff in, asked someone for help. So that's turned into a really interesting dynamic in my life. My husband and I are very funny because he lets me be as independent as I want to be. So when we go to my stepdaughter's house when she's moving in, he gets at that time, my walker, when I was just learning to walk again, gets me set up, says, you good to go? I said, I'm good. He rushes off to the house. My son-in-law's looking at him like he's the biggest jerk in the world and says, what about your wife? Because they know my mobility is suffering. And my husband, he's off to help his daughter move into her new house. He goes, oh, she's fine. She's got it. And so my son-in-law, who is a delightful young man, comes rushing up to me to help me. And I said, no, I got it. And I go scooting across their yard with my walker that at that time had 4 wheels. And so learning to allow others to provide help has really been a beneficial thing in my work because we just had a Halloween party at my office. Upper right corner is my staff making Halloween decorations. I used to make all the decorations myself. I can do this. I'm Wonder Woman. And I would take half a day off and I'd decorate the whole office. And it was fun, but I've learned that when I ask my staff to help me, they become part of the process. And every party is the best party they've ever seen. And they enjoy it more because they get to be a part of it and they get to bring their creativity to it. And honestly, I show up with half-baked ideas and a table of supplies and go, this is what I saw on Pinterest. And they all figure it out. I work with engineers. They're bright. They love doing something creative. And so it's turned into a really great bonding and team building exercise for my staff. And most recently, I was featured on my company's website in October as part of the Disability Employment Awareness Month. And so I got to share my story with 13,000 people. So every time I get on a conference call now, people, or go to a meeting, people go, "Oh, hey, I've heard about you." It's a little surreal for me to have my personal life out there so much, but sharing my story and not keeping it to myself has allowed me to have really amazing conversations with people who also have a mother who took 3 years to get a diagnosis for what she was dealing with, or that they themselves are dealing with an invisible disability that others don't know and understand. Had one woman who said, I feel lazy, I feel guilty, I feel like I'm a bad employee. Thank you for sharing, because now I feel better about where I'm at. So it's hasn't been all bad for me. There's been a few good things that have come out of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I have a really pertinent question I wanted to ask. How many chickens do you have?
13. I have 13 chickens. My rooster, my beloved little rooster, passed away. But I have 13 chickens. We have a lame hen who lives in our greenhouse. And my husband takes care of her. So I joke that my animals are mimicking my physical attributes.
No, in seriousness, I love what you said about learning to ask for help and accept help. I think a lot of people could probably relate to that, especially women with ALD. So much gets focused on the children, rightfully so, but I think that's just really incredible that you're learning to accept that. And so thank you for sharing that. What would you like to see I know you've mentioned you'd like to see more research and treatment options for women with ALD. What would you like to see?
Yeah, just anything. I will be candid here. I understand the importance of figuring out what to do with the young boys and the children. Women, we are not dying from this, but I'm sitting here listening to all of these research projects, and they're all on males. And you're talking about patient, but I know as I'm listening to you, your patients are males. And I just think that women need a representation. We're, as a whole, underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, not diagnosed at all, have trouble getting the health care and resources that we need to begin with. But also, we're generally the caregivers. And the ones that our child has gotten that chromosome from us, and anything we can do to support the women, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And how can we care for those in our life when we ourselves are struggling to get out of bed and feel like our life is worth living some days, especially in the early days?
Thank you for that, Chris. Okay, I know we are at time, but can we do 5 minutes for questions? Is that okay from the audience? Okay, so do we have any questions for any of our panelists? No, I don't see any. Any questions online, Felicity? Maybe I just had such good questions. Okay, we have some shout outs of how incredible you guys are. And we do have one question here from Aaron, real quick.
I just want to say thank you so much to each of you. I mean, this is really impactful. This is like a highlight of the weekend. I mean, hearing your stories and it just hits me. It hits me big time. Thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty to each one of you. I wanted to ask Brandon specifically, as another man with AMN, I'm just genuinely curious about other guys' experiences, and I realize we're all individuals. We're all on our own journey. I know you I identify with what you say about just kind of like taking things as they come. Would you say that you spend much time thinking about, progression of AMN or developing cerebral disease? Like, is that something that you actively think about very much? And if so, like, how do you deal with that? And if not, maybe why?
Yeah, going back to that kind of worrying about what you can control, I try not to. I think there's some interview with Bill Burr where he says something to the effect of, I mean, wouldn't life be so much better if you just didn't worry about all the stuff that could happen to you and then you just deal with it when it comes up? And I think that's kind of the approach that I've taken on the, yeah, it could happen, but I can't do anything about it other than the MRI checks and those things, and so I just keep living life.
Yeah, and for me, like I noted, I'm the only one in my family. I did reach out because looking at how the genes could express themselves. My dad died when he was 46, so I can generally say no, I don't think he had it, but he had two brothers that lived until their 80s or 90s. So I would say it didn't come from that side. But I did reach out to my siblings just to let them know, FYI, this is I did a group Facebook message. This is what it is. Here's a website for more information. This is how it gets passed down, just so that it was my nephews actually that I was worried about, my sister's boys that are having children. And unfortunately, my sister didn't respond and just left the Facebook chat. So we've never had that conversation. She doesn't really talk to our family, but so I haven't had the experience of, I'm 51, I'm not having kids. So it ends with me. It started with me. It ends with me.
I'll just answer real quick. It's been quite some time. It's been 10 years, since my family was first diagnosed. But no, nothing of that. Even my 26-year-old niece at the time, they talked to her about reproductive, but nothing about symptoms.
They told me I was a carrier, and that was basically it that I needed to know. I didn't really ever learn that there was a thing as asymptomatic women until I started joining ALD Connect's monthly calls. They did tell us that we should reach out to our family members ASAP, especially if any of them are in childbearing age. So my results had come back. I was pending the testing of my mother, and I immediately called all my cousins on both my mother and my father's side to let them know, hey, I know you have your children, my cousins, are all at childbearing age. This is something I'm waiting for my parents to get tested, so I don't know which side of the family it's on right now, but you may want to kind of halt that process so you don't have to go through necessarily what I'm currently going through and experiencing. I did the MAD family tree and traced ALD back 5 generations during that process, but I didn't really learn anything about IVF and if I wanted to continue having a family, what that would look like actually until Franny ended up having a session on it at a previous, I think, ALD engagement. That's really where I ended up learning more about the IVF route. And I have a brother who's getting married in March, and I'm sure we'll want to start a family. And so it's something that I have to push them to talk about, though, with someone we're not getting it at a newborn screen phase. When we first get diagnosed, I think the focus is really all on your son. And here's what you need to know for him, which is understandable. But we also need to take care of ourselves and kind of also figure out, if there are plenty of other mothers who want to continue having children and what that looks like. It should be talked about.
I just wanted to say one quick thing because she brought up not finding anybody to draw her blood and send it to KKI. I just wanted to let everyone know I sent the blood to KKI of all my family members, every single one of them. It can be done.
Yeah, my phlebotomist is a friend of mine, and she finally circled back a couple days later and said, if you can't find anyone, call me. So just more barriers.
What an incredible session. Let's give an amazing round of applause for all those